So for this side quest we travelled to Dublin to celebrate my brother's birthday with Guinness and ghosts, and we didn't have to look very far to find either. There's no shortage of spooky things to do in the city. Halloween originated in Ireland after all, but top of my list is the bog bodies. Squirreled away in the National Museum, the bog bodies are more than 3,000 years old, but some of them are so well preserved they still have fingernails and hair. There's 4 in the museum and they were all found in peat bogs in Ireland, where the low water temperature and high acidity slowed down decomposition, preserving skin, hair and organs, effectively mummifying the bodies. But more interesting than how they were found is how they died. They were all murdered, and archaeologists believe they may have been the victims of human sacrifice. After death, the bodies were placed in the bogs as they were believed to be the threshold between the mortal world and the spirit world. Galeg Man or Galeg Man was discovered in 1821 with a rope made from twisted willow twigs wrapped around his throat, which experts say indicates that he was either strangled during a ritual killing or executed as a criminal. Old Croghan Man was discovered in 2003 by workmen clearing a drainage ditch through a peat bog, and they actually called the police thinking they'd uncovered a murder victim. And it turns out they had, just not from this century. He'd been horrifically tortured before he died. His nipples had been cut off, he'd been stabbed in the ribs, and there was a cut on his arm that suggested he tried to defend himself during the attack. Cloney Cabin Man was also discovered in 2003, and experts quickly determined he'd died from a smashed skull, and the injury that ended his life is still covered by an impressive head of hair. Good for him. After fueling up, we headed to Glasnevin, Ireland's largest cemetery and home to the graves of some of the most significant figures in Irish history. Since 1832, more than 1.5 million people have been buried there, but they weren't all allowed to rest in peace. Back in the 1800s, Glasnevin was a hotspot for body snatchers. Before medical schools had a steady supply of cadavers, resurrectionists would sneak in under the cover of darkness to dig up freshly buried bodies and sell them for anatomy lessons. So families started guarding the graves. They were building watchtowers and even installing metal cages called mort safes to keep the loved ones safe. The star of the cemetery has to be the circular crypt in the middle, and even they had to be reinforced. Families from as far back as the 1800s have been sealed in behind metal doors with gates on the inside to keep those pesky grave robbers out. And it will come as absolutely no surprise to anyone that the place is teeming with spooky stories. The most famous is that of the Newfoundland dog. He belonged to ship captain John McNeill Boyd, who died in 1861 during a sea rescue and was buried in the cemetery. The loyal lad refused to leave his headstone and eventually starved to death, and it's said that the dog's ghost still roams the cemetery at night. Bless him. On a cheerier note, the cemetery also has a little shop, but more exciting than that, it has a pub. The aptly named Gravediggers was established in 1833 and is literally built into the walls of Glasnevin. And as the name suggests, the place was incredibly popular with gravediggers, but it also made a killing with the recently bereaved. The cemetery adjacent pub is also known for its ghostly goings-on, with many of its bartenders saying they've seen the man in tweed, a well-dressed spirit who sits at the bar and occasionally pinches people's pints. Good for him. I never miss an opportunity to stick my head in a uni, so I was positively giddy when my brother said we'd be walking through Trinity College on our way back from the museum. It dates back to 1592, and it's acquired a hell of a lot of ghost stories in those years. The most well known is that of the former lecturer Edward Ford. Now, Ford wasn't particularly well liked by his students, so one night in 1734, a group of drunk students decided to throw stones at his window. When Ford appeared, they shot him. He died 2 hours later, refusing to give up the names of the students who'd attacked him, and his spirit is said to still roam the rubrics, which is the oldest building in the college. Now, we've all done spooky tours before, but this one is something else. The ground floor is full of horror props, including haunted dolls, and you know they're good if they have to keep them behind glass. And unlike a typical bus tour, guests are never invited to look out the window. In fact, the curtains stay closed for the whole 2-hour event, leaving the tour guide to rely on the ancient art of storytelling to paint us a picture.
Sleep was impossible, so I opened all the windows, but to no avail.
The tour includes a couple of stops. My favourite was the church ruins that are so haunted, they've officially been closed to the public by the government. Then our tour guide Finn whipped out his little black box of medieval torture devices and explained how each one worked. Apparently they aren't replicas either.
Happy birthday.
Then my brother had to endure the ultimate torture, the whole bus singing happy birthday to him. There wasn't a little shot, but I did take part in a little horror film quiz, and I won a book. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed our little spooky scary side quest to Dublin. See you next time!